Okay, we've made all the cuts, and not to belabor the point, but all the cuts are the same as on a flat ceiling, except for that plumb cut. I'm Ron Paulk, designer of the Paulk Workbench, the Paulk Total Station, the Smart Wood Shop, among other things, which you can get a set of plans, purchase and download by checking the description of this video down below. All right, let's go see how they fit. So this is a flat ceiling, and the only reason I'm here is I want to show you that I cut a standard inside corner. Now I coat my corners, but for doing the test pieces, I did miters so that I could glue them together and just show you how they fit. And also this will help me mark on the angles, but I want to show you this is exactly what would fit here if we had a flat ceiling. So that's a perfect fit. And I didn't check this corner ahead of time, by the way. And so that's a perfect fit. If I were, when I run these three pieces with the return down there and two inside corners, that's going to be the cut I make. So I'm going to take this now and show you how it works on an inside corner for the vaulted ceilings as well. So here we've got our angle going up, the same one that we measured on the other side. And this is an inside corner. And I didn't check it to see if it were a 90, a perfect 90 ahead of time. I just know that it's an inside corner that's close to a 90. I've got the same trim that works on the flat corner, same spring angle, same miter, nothing different than cutting for a flat ceiling. And then I put it up here and just find that sweet spot, and it fits perfect. And this eliminates the need to do it in a two-step process, a way I've done it for a long time in my career, where I actually turn the corner with a pie-shaped piece and then change the angle so I would have a third piece here. This looks a lot better, it's way faster, and you're cutting this as if it is a flat ceiling. So the inside corner works. What about the outside corner? So here's an outside corner, and I don't have a flat ceiling with an outside corner to show you, but this would fit on any outside 90-degree corner. Put it up, find that sweet spot, and there it is. And again, I want to point out that I didn't put a protractor on these corners. If I've shown a carpenter once, I've shown a carpenter 500 times that they'll say, oh, you know, corners are off. The framers didn't get them right. Not true. Doesn't matter if it's off a little bit, 89, 91, it'll work. Cut it as if it's a 90. It's the spring angle. Get the spring angle right, and it's going to fit, and it's going to look good. So we have our inside corners and our outside corners. If you watch that other video series, you're going to know how to make those. So now we've eliminated any complexity to running crown up a vault. Inside corners, outside corners are the same as they are on the level. You just have to find that sweet spot and make a mark, because you need those marks to measure to, because you're going to measure to that bottom mark, and that will be for your length of cut. But that's just measuring with your tape measure how long the piece is going to be. The miters, inside, outside, are going to be the same. So this is the one that I didn't even come with the ladder and measured. I did it on that corner down there because I knew the plumb off that would be exactly the same. And this one is also a little bit of feel because it was an 18.8 when we did the math. And so I had to sort of bump it off there to see. So we'll see how these fit. Absolutely perfect fit. So what I'm going to do is take my pencil and I'm going to mark the bottom edge of both pieces and right where they bisect. Because remember, the only complexity, and it's not really hard if you know this when you have these sample pieces, is your measuring points are from down here and again from the mark we made down there. And so once I have these marks, I know I'll be able to measure and know exactly how long the pieces need to be, and I know exactly what the cut needs to be. And again, this is an angle. I didn't even come up the ladder to measure, and it fit perfect with the first cut. if you do the math, you take your measurements right with your protractor, and you understand the miter saw being off by 90 degrees, you get a perfect fit every time. Now this is the last one to check. This is the one that I came up the ladder and got the 154 and did the math and cut 13s. Find that sweet spot right into the ridge. Perfect fit. And now I'm going to just make that same mark right here on the bottom of both pieces and bisect the angle. But I've got a bonus on this one because I've got a short piece to this corner, and then I'm going to turn the corner with that same 23 degrees off the miter saw. For this one, I'm going to go ahead and mark the piece, and then I'm going to write on the back the fact that that's going to be that 23 degree cut. And this one will be an actual piece that I'll install, and that'll save me from measuring that little one. This will be an impressive one because it'll have the ridge joint where it changes angle, and then it'll turn the corner and then head down. So this will be a really pretty looking, very complex looking one, but you saw how easy that was.
Something happened with the video when I was putting together this 135 degree corner. So I had a little B-roll here showing you the finished product, the fit, and just to tell you what's going on here. So this is typically referred to as a 45 degree corner, but it's not. That would be an acute corner. This is obtuse, so it's kind of the other side of that. So it's 135 degrees. We bisect that angle, that gives us 67.5, and then we subtract that total from 90, which is the degree that the miter saw is off by, and that gives us 22.5, a pretty typical cut. In fact, there's a detent on almost all miter saws. I do not cut these, whether it's crown or base or chair rail, at 22.5. I cut them at 23. Anytime there's a drywall corner, they put a corner bead on, they float it out. It's floated out about a foot or so. It looks good to the eye, but it creates a little bit steeper corner. So I don't even check these. I just go ahead and cut them at 23 degrees. So again, this is another one of those miter saw things, and real world, when you measure with your protractor, it's not going to tell you what to do, but just know that on your miter saw, that 22.5 is a detent, so it's a little bit of a struggle to bump the saw off that half a degree. You sort of have to hold it and then tighten it down, but it works good. And again, I don't even check the corners. I just set it at 23.
So I've shown you how to cut every corner. All of the inside and outside miters have been the exact same cuts as if the ceiling is level. Nothing special. We've talked about the math on the miter saw, that you need to subtract your number from 90 or subtract 90 from it. Another tip I want to give you is measuring these angles. Now, I use my digital tape for just about all of my measuring. I'll take this up in that corner right on my mark, and I'll shoot to that corner, and that'll give me this length. But going up the angles, I really can't use this. This doesn't help me. So I go back to my old school methods. I have a nice stiff piece of wood. This is cut to exactly 120 inches. It's a good number for me to be able to add and subtract to. So I will get up on my ladder, and I'm going to put this end right on that mark that I made with my test piece, right on the, I'm going to put the top edge of the trim right on that, and I'm going to make a mark up at that angle, exactly that 4 inches down, which is what the trim is. And I'm going to make a mark, and then from my peak mark up there, I'm going to measure back down to this mark, add the two together, and I'll have what I need for that run. And I'll just repeat that same process on all of the angles as I go. So with this stick, I can measure all of these by myself and get an accurate measurement and not have to go back and forth to the saw. a couple of bonus tips here to help you improve your work and take it to the next level. This is optional, but I always do it. So I'll take a piece of trim, a piece of scrap trim. I already know where it goes. I've made my marks with my test pieces. So I know that it's 4 1/8 down. I've got my marks. So I'll put it where it goes. And you'll notice there's a little bit of a gap on the bottom. That's because we're actually springing it off the wall at a little different angle than it's designed for. So that opens that up. That is certainly caulkable, and this is a fairly steep pitch. If it were less, it would still fit, but that would roll down a little bit more. But that's certainly caulkable, but I like it tighter than that. So what I'll do is put it on the mark. I'll take my pencil, and right at where the gap is, I'll set the pencil at about the gap, and I'll run it. And I've got that mark. And what I want to do is I want to take that off of the material. Now what I do is I have a fixture, a shop-made fixture that fits on my table saw. It's made out of plywood. It takes about 30 minutes to make, and I'll show you that. But I'll run all of the trim. So all 6 of my 16 footers, I will run those through and take this off of all of them. It won't change any of my measurements, any of my dimensions. All it's going to do is take that gap away. So that little gap at the bottom that could be caulked, if you want to take your work to the next level, you can take off that little bit with a jig that I have. Now this jig is pretty simple. It is just an angle, and it sits on the table saw. I mean, again, nothing really special. It is just a 45 cut on 2 sides of a board. This one is just a square cut, and I've screwed it in, and the bottoms match up just so they sit, you know, flat on the table saw. And then I took another 45 so I could create another plumb board here. And then one of the little fall offs from cutting this 45, I just dropped in because this is an acute angle, and when I slide the trim through there, it would kind of stick. So just drop that in, glued it, and pinned it. So it's really a rough piece, but then I'll be able to slide the trim through here and adjust the blade at an angle to take off whatever angle I need. Now, because of the tip of the saw, the blade tips, typically your fence is to the right, and so the blade tips away from the fence. So I've had to set the fence up to the left side of the blade. And all I'm going to do is I've got a couple of holes drilled in the back of this, and I just take some clamps, clamp it to the fence, and it doesn't really matter exactly where it goes. I just want this blade to kind of come up in the middle of it. And so I could move it in and out now with the fence. And so I have the scribe mark that I made on this board. So this is going to slide through just like this. So I'm going to put it on the far side of the blade and tip the blade until I get about that angle. And again, this is not super critical. The main thing I'm doing here is I am not going to cut into the face of the trim. So I'm going to be behind that slightly, and that's going to go tight to the wall. So I'm just making sure that the blade is just cutting the back side of the trim, not going to catch onto that front edge. And then I'll need it to come up high enough. Once I have that, I'll lock that in. Just double check. And then I'll run it through. Now, I'm running this piece through to show you, and we'll fit it on the wall above. But the way I do this is I'll have all of my 16-foot material, and I will rip all of it, because this will be fine up on the vault, going up the wall as well as on the flat. So you can see I still have that painted edge. I haven't cut into the front side of my trim what's going to show. So here's the piece that I've cut that away on the table saw, and now when I put it at its mark where it goes, you can see that now it's tight to the wall. And again, this is optional, but I like it as tight as possible. And if I'm doing hardwood, stain grade stuff, it becomes maybe not as optional, because then you're trying to caulk and it may show, you know, either colored caulk or carrying your wall color. I just like to make it tighter, and it only takes me to run 6 pieces of trim through the table saw. Takes maybe 10 minutes. And again, it doesn't change any of my measurements. And now finally, you know that every inside joint I make in finished carpentry, whether it's base molding, crown molding, chair rail, I do not do inside miters. I did the inside miters to do the test pieces because the fit is the same. But all of my inside corners are coped. Learn to cope, and I show you how in that other series. It is faster than putting up inside miters because it installs faster. It takes you just a little bit longer to cut, but with the fixtures that I showed you how to make in that other series, you practice this, and I knocked this one out. Literally, I got out the jig to make this one cut, set up the jig, and I made this ready to go in under a minute. And now to install it, when I put this piece in, and I know how I would run this room, I would put this piece in first, and then I would run the cope into it, and this would be my last piece, this level piece, and I would do a double cope. And then I'm gonna make that piece a 1/16 of an inch longer and spring it in just the way I did in that other video series, and it pushes in tight to the corner. You got drywall that can be pushed in, it may not be tight, you got wood that moves. If you do an inside miter, you can't push them in because they slide past each other. And in a year or less, an inside miter will come apart. Houses move, wood shrinks, things dry out, but a cope joint will last a long time. And when I'm installing, it's a lot easier because I can pop it in and hold it up there and pop it in, and I'm not trying to find that sweet spot with the inside miter, because again, when you're dealing with those 245s, if you put pressure on one over the other, one will slide past. And so getting the fit with a cope is a lot easier, so the install goes faster. So the cope is exactly the same as if it were level. So the same that I showed you in the other series. And the only difference in this joint is that now I'm running an angle on the, so instead of this being a butt cut the way it would be on a standard cope, I've just run that same angle. That's that peak angle that we figured out for the ridge. It's the same plumb cut. It's just a plumb cut. And that's so that it will go tight to the wall. If I cut that square at 90 degrees, it would be sticking away from the wall. It fits in perfectly tight. Hopefully you can see that. And again, I would put this piece up first, right to its mark, and then I would have this double cope, and I would squeeze that in with that extra 1/16, and it would push tight into that corner. So yes, cutting the cope exactly the way you would on a flat ceiling also works on the vaults. And again, I didn't check what this vault was before I went to the saw and set anything up. So this will work on any vault. Okay, so I've shown you that cutting crown for a vault is exactly the same as for cutting for a flat ceiling. And like I said, I have a 6-part series. If you watch that, you'll know exactly how to do all these joints. The only difference was the ridge, which we did that with the protractor. That was straightforward and simple. And on our cope, we had, instead of a butt cut, we had to cut that same angle that we figured out. So it's one cut, and we know what it is everywhere. So I'm not going to be crowning this room because 1, I don't own the house, and 2, the homeowner hasn't asked me to do it. I just took the opportunity to show you how things would fit. We've already done all the joints, the hard part. Everything else is just getting the distance in between, connecting the dots. So now not only can I say that crown molding is so easy, but crown molding a vaulted ceiling is so easy. Well, if you enjoy these videos, be sure to give me a thumbs up, subscribe, ring the bell if you subscribe so that you'll know when I drop a new video. Also, if you want to support the channel, you'll find a link to Ron's Amazon store down below in the description. If you buy anything from Amazon, they'll share a little bit with us, but won't charge you any extra. Thanks for taking the time to watch. Have a great day.